Hello, friends.
Hi. How are you?
Welcome in Tamil. Hello, Professor.
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. We're stuck at home still. We're instructed to work from home, so I'm in my home office.
So, on behalf of the Global Media Education Council, I'm delighted to welcome you to the 23rd day of this Global Communication Education Conclave. As you know, we've decided on a 75-day event to mark the 75 years of Indian independence. And this event is supported by, among others, the International Association for Media and Communication Research, Makhanlal Chaturvedi University, and the Media and Entertainment Skills Council. And we're delighted to have a real accomplished panel today, beginning with Professor Dr. B.P. Sanjay, one of our senior most academicians, one of our most revered academicians. We're having a very, very senior academician who will be conferred the Lifetime Achievement Award today as well, Dr. Josephine Joseph. And of course, who doesn't know Professor Graham Murdoch? Thank you again, Professor, for supporting us in all we do. And we are absolutely honored to have you here. And who better than Professor Murdoch to speak at a webinar on a changing landscape of political economy of media and communication. And as you can see, this platform, the Global Media Education Council, apart from many other things, celebrates the diversity of media education. And it was a delight having, backroom discussions with colleagues, who were speaking in Tamil for a change. So this was a real delight to listen to these conversations backroom. And of course, looking forward, as usual, to another very, very interesting day ahead. And these sessions have been made possible only because of very senior colleagues like Dr. Punita D, who is the moderator for the day. And I have the honor of introducing her, and then I'll hand it over to Dr. Punita D. So she is the head and associate professor at the postgraduate department of communication at the Women's Christian College in Chennai. She has 23 years of teaching experience as well as 3 years of industry experience. Her doctoral thesis was on the political economy of entertainment television. She's been part of the Curriculum Revision Committee for Journalism and Mass Communication, an extremely active teacher across the country. And she's been nominated by the University of Madras as I said, the Curriculum Revision Committee for Journalism and Mass Communication. She's a member of the Board of Studies in various colleges in Chennai as well. She's published chapters in a number of books and presented papers in many national and international seminars and conferences. And I'm happy to inform that just 2 months ago, she received the Best Teacher Award from the International Association of Lions Club on 25th September 2021. So on behalf of the Global Media Education Council, I once again welcome you all, and waiting forward to listen to the stalwarts. I now hand it over to the moderator for the day, Dr. Punita D. Thank you, Dr. Punita, for arranging this and for making this possible.
Thank you, Dr. Umashankar Pandey. I think we are a bit early. We started a little early. It's not 7:30 yet. And some of them are having trouble joining, I believe. They're just sending me messages. Can the technical people just look into it? Some of them are having trouble joining.
Do you want me to repeat the same thing, whatever I said again?
No, that's fine. But then I think some of them are having trouble joining. So.
Oh, I see. Can we just share the link again? Who's there backroom? Manushri and others, can you just share the link to...
I think it's asking for login details and things like that, I believe. They're just messaging me.
They need to just register. They just need to write in their name and their email, and then the next slide will be where they can join. So they'll have to do that one single thing, they need to just register first.
Okay. I think they're just doing it. I think that we didn't specify, so I think they're having trouble joining.
Oh, I think Zoom, has this way where you have to...
Can we just wait a few minutes for them to join? They're not at 7:30 yet, so just, I think a few minutes, if it's okay with the panelists.
Yeah, no problem. They need to write their name. When they first join Zoom, there's a box where they need to write their name, and you can see we all have a name underneath our faces. If you don't have that, you can't be on the system. So it's just to say who you are.
How's the weather there, Professor Murdoch?
Hello, Professor. This is the first time we are meeting. I'm Dr. Punita. I've been coordinating with you. Thank you for accepting.
Well, thank you for all your help.
How's the weather there, Professor?
Sorry?
How's the weather there?
Oh, today it's not so bad. It's even a little bit of weak sun, but we have another storm system coming. We've had 3 storm systems, so it's coming on winter here, and it's a little bit turbulent.
We just withstood a storm 2 days ago in the eastern part of India. So climate change is real. I mean, this is happening.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. Not that particular storm, but
Because it's just 7:31. I think we started a bit early.
yeah, it's okay. I'm free for the rest of the day, so it doesn't really matter. Take as long as you need.
I'm just messaging them.
Do you want me to do the formal introduction again, Dr. Punita, or is it okay?
I think it's okay, no problem. Let a few more join, because definitely there are many joining, that much I'm sure. Because it's just Sahitya is here. My department is here. They're just joining. All of them are just joining. Sahitya, Shakti, Jai Shaktivel is joining.
Yes, I can see our colleagues, Professor Alia Ahmed, Professor Joya Chakraborty, my
colleagues are also here.
Jai
Dr. Asha Alexander.
Yes, Asha Alexander. Yes, we've met, I think.
Magarika, Lokeshwari is here.
Marvin, Swati.
Yeah, our technical instructor. Yeah, and yeah, Krishna Priya is here. We're just joining. Yeah, I think we started a little early, 7:30. So I think it's just 7:33 now. So our people are just joining in.
I think we can begin, Dr. Punita, and then we
okay, fine. Okay, then we should begin. Okay. A warm good evening to one and all. It's indeed is my video on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. A warm good evening to one and all. It's indeed an honor to moderate a session with 2 of my wonderful teachers, Professor Sanjay as a child and Dr. Josephine Joseph, who receives the Lifetime Achievement Award. And she was also my doctoral supervisor. And we have an amazing international scholar like Professor Graham Murdoch in the panel. It's a fangirl moment for me. So let's begin the session with a short introduction to our chair, Professor Sanjay. And as cliched as it may sound, Dr. Sanjay needs no introduction. His illustrious career cannot be capsuled within a few minutes. Yet, the highlights of Dr. B.B. Sanjay to you. He is right now the Professor of Communication, Manipal Institute of Communication. And we knew Sanjay sir as the young academician who was who did his PhD from Canada, and he was bubbling with enthusiasm. So that's Sanjay sir we still retain. And some of my class batchmates are also here. So they will recollect how he was with us. And Dr. Jocelyn you learn a lot of things from both of these wonderful teachers, how to interact with students. And it's been a learning process for me, like throughout my academic career. Sanjay, moving over to Sanjay sir, was one of the founding Vice Chancellor of the Central University of Tamil Nadu. And he was the director of the University of Hyderabad and also a pro Vice Chancellor for many years. And sir has been, when it sounds so cliche, sir has been with all the selection committees, and he has been with MHRD, he has been with TIS, and then he's participated in numerous programs, and he still continues to contribute. A senior of mine just mentioned that ma'am and sir are still contributing to media education, media and communication studies, and it's so nice to see you. Sir has also been in the NAC peer committees, and this goes on and on. The number of achievements sir has, so we can go on. But then let's go on to the program, and I hand over the session to Chair. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Punita. Thank you, Uma Shankar, and welcome, Professor Graham Muda, and welcome, Dr. Josephine, and all my students and friends in the conference today. It's indeed a kind of a nice day for me for two simple reasons. One, I'm able to not only share my limited understanding of political economy with a stalwart like Professor Graham Muda this evening, and also participate in the award that my colleague is receiving for her lifetime achievement. And I also just had an opportunity to see the wonderful plan of action of the GMEC and all the kind of programs that they have. One important aspect that I noticed was that so many youngsters are taking the field of media education to greater heights in our country, and that's very encouraging for people like us who probably were struggling to network in the younger days of our teaching. But that may be history now, and the education field, the research field is in brighter and younger minds today. I have a two-part assignment for this evening as a chair. One, of course, is to kind of, briefly reflect on the topic of the day, following which our distinguished speaker, Professor Graham Muda, is going to address us on a contextual understanding of climate change and COVID, etc., in terms of the political economy perspective. And I also have the second task, which is to look over the presentation of the Lifetime Award to my distinguished colleague and a person whom I know for more than 4 decades now. Now, let me kind of do the first task, in terms of reflecting, on what the probably is the nature of political economy discourse in a country like India. Of course, India is of subcontinental dimensions, and to kind of compress the area or the nature of discussions in 10 or 8 minutes is indeed a kind of a enduring and a challenging task. Nevertheless, one important aspect that probably sets India and a few other countries apart is the colonial variable in our political economy discourse. The colonial element is just not historical, nor is being mentioned as flogging any other country or colonial power. But what it also sets out is the patterns of political economy of communications development that took place in many colonial countries. And you've had the foremost scholars and the founding father of one stream of political economy, Karl Marx himself, talking about the Indian railways as a first major treatise of looking at the hinterland, the peripheral, and the exploitation of resources in India. You also have scholars like Daniel Hedrick and others talking about what they described as the tools of empire, which basically encircled the colonial globe. More recently, and also in the context of the McBride Commission, we have had the political economy perspective in terms of markets and also information flow, the colonial origins of the Global Five, which indeed is a major discourse in terms of flows of information from one country to another, or from a group of countries to another. So that may be one aspect of colonial dimension in communications development in India, which cannot be forgotten, as probably laying the foundation of nascent capitalism, and also imbibing the British and the American model of both what I would call as the market economy to begin with, and also ideologically trying to look at socialist countries as well in terms of the mixed economy approach that we had towards the foundation of many of our economic inputs. Now, where does media and communication fit into this structure? One, of course, is the kind of argument that one can make from the PE perspective is what kind of coalition of interests in the media took place in the formation of what we call as the three distinct phases of Indian media development, i.e. the colonial phase, the nationalistic phase, and the post-emergency phase. Now, this is a very important question that some of us have examined with reference to, for example, the origins of colonial broadcasting system in India, and also the kind of nexus that the Marconi wireless company had in the formative days of broadcasting in India. And also, contrary to the democratic traditions of the British broadcasting system, how the state conveniently adopted state as a central to broadcasting system in India is one of the formative phases of understanding of the dimension of the state. Normally, when you look at market and the third sector, very often the state is ignored. But in the Indian context, state, which basically in terms of a highly capitalistic perspective, does not necessarily have to have a role in communication. In fact, indeed, had a role in communication and created one of the largest broadcasting systems in the world, radio to begin with and television later. Now, purely from the economy perspective, what did happen was that, Rutkowski and others have talked about the political economy of spectrum allocation from the International Telecommunications Union perspective. See, part of the judgment that led to the media reforms in India indeed came in relation to cricket board and entertainment companies filing the case in the High Court of India, the highest court of India, which ruled that public airwaves are not necessarily the property of the state, but they are the property of the public. Now, the interpretation of what the public...
Sir, excuse me, sir. So can you be a bit louder? People are not finding it difficult to hear you.
Is that now audible? Or
now it's clear. Now it's clear. It was very low.
Yeah. I was telling you that the whole notion of what constitutes public property in terms of the basic foundation resource of the present communication, which is the spectrum allocation, came about from Supreme Court of India, which essentially ruled that airwaves are public property. But the flip side of this argument was the media reforms that brought in a huge inflow of market capitalization of the media industry in India. That is, I'm talking about the post-1991 liberalization reforms, which spawned the Indian communication ecosystem with more than 800 television channels, and which brought about kind of a challenge to the public broadcasting system as well. Now, this kind of market intervention in the broadcasting sector in the Indian context has had two or three. Yeah, are you? Am I sorry? Sorry, am I clear? Is it?
Yeah, now it's clear, sir. Now it's clear.
The kind of market intervention that took place in the media industry had consequences for what I would call as one is the immediate kind of isolation of the state in the broadcasting sector. But that did not continue for a very long period because the structure of the telecommunications industry is such that in India, or for that matter anywhere else, is it's highly regulated, and the state has a very high stake in regulation of the telecom industry, which means very significant things for the so-called convergence of media that we are talking about. So although the state kind of withdrew from major content, not necessarily from the network, the private sector broadcasting, initially took it upon itself that it could do with highly critical democratic function that any media is supposed to do. But over a period of time, and more recently, as probably scholars like Murdoch and others, have pointed out elsewhere, the nexus between the state and the market in a country like India, particularly in the media sector, has probably come a complete circle, with the result that the earlier critics of state broadcasting system now have a kind of an intellectual wish we had a robust state broadcasting system that could at least protect our interests and welfare schemes. This is one aspect of media development from a political economy perspective that some of us are engaged with. Now, internationally, what has happened is that I particularly would invoke, Graham Murdoch's dialogue on Dallas Smythe's, argument of audience of commodity and other aspects, where, internationally, for some reason, the third world, perspective for a very long time was missing. At best, it was always seen as a kind of what we call as a dumping yard of cultural products and services. In the heydays of cultural imperialism argument, scholars like Herbert Schiller, Tapio Veris, and Carle Nordensink, and others had talked about the unidirectional flow of goods and services. But it is also to the credit of the subsequent work of Vincent Mosco and Dallas Smythe, where they talked about the resilience of a country like India in terms of what they argued as cultural screens. Now, lo and behold, the cultural screen argument was one of the reasons for a scholar like Robin Jeffrey to talk about the nexus between capitalism and the rise of the Indian language press. Till such time, Robin Jeffrey posed this question of the nexus between capitalism and the rise of the Indian language press. We had always looked at language press as a kind of a subsidiary to the nationalist English and the Hindi press. So that was one aspect of press analysis, which came, in terms of looking at the economic resources and allocations with regard to the Indian language, printing press. But continuing with the argument of culture and cultural screen, what did happen was that the whole concept of the rise of regional language television channels did pose kind of a counter to the perception that everything was imposed. But having said that, we also necessarily have to look at the mergers and acquisitions that were taking place. Now, Indian media is not completely as robust as it should be in terms of its cultural manifestation, because international capital and the way the recent Reporters with Borders has analyzed the media ownership scenario in India, equates about 30 to 40 institutions and about 58 individuals controlling bulk of the media in India. So the content, and this is where some of the scholars have argued that we necessarily also have to look at the content, the cultural industries argument, which has come about in a big way. Now, these are some of the strands of political economy that is particular to India that we are looking at. And also the relationship between a federal structure, a federal polity, as we would call, and the state's autonomy has had a different kind of a communication trajectory. For example, broadcasting is always a central subject. Many leaders have in the past argued that broadcasting should be within the federal setup, also the state subject, which has never been granted, by the way, because we have the archaic Telegraph Act, which somehow ensures that the broadcasting and the regulation part remains with the central government. Now, imagine a huge country like India with 29 states and dozens of languages not being able to rule and regulate over broadcasting. This is one. Now, what has happened more recently from a political economy perspective is in the era of digital media. Now, in the era of digital media, what has happened is that the legacy media, which always looked upon the state and the corporate as a source of advertising support, had to perforce do the function of somehow pandering to the interest because advertising was a major source of support. But the good thing that has happened in the era of digital media is the rise of 10 or 12 very independent media networks, which theoretically do not necessarily have to depend either on the state or the market. And the argument that, as one scholar has recently pointed out, is if either the state or the market were to kind of impose its will and try to shut it down, the argument that is being thrown around by the media companies is there is always the crowd funding that is possible. Now, the second aspect of digital media is the state is, unhappy with the way the digital media is looking at either the functioning of the state or, some other aspects. So the regulation of digital media has come into a range of criticism, apparently in the name of freedom and apparently in the name of democracy. Now, having said this, all criticism is not necessarily with regard to the state. In the Indian context, moral and cultural forces play a very important role in the digital media and also the OTT platform. Network OTTs like Amazon or Netflix have always had to bow down to certain kind of pressure groups, be it a question of representation, be it a question of identity. So both the moral fabric and the state also act upon the kind of regulation that is expected of the industry. The last point that I wish to make is the whole concept of microblogging platforms and the relationship of both the state and the market. One is, I'm sure that Modoc will kind of engage in a different kind of a debate later, is that the laws of the companies from where these operate are so sensitive to the respective host governments, which they are not giving the same kind of sanction to the recipient governments in which they function. Now, this has been become a matter of debate. Now, the debate here is not so much as to whether the present or any government is working contrary to democratic principles. That is a different aspect altogether. But the fact remains that when you are complying with laws, which the media structures and the media industries have perforce, be it the FCC or be it the European Union Commission, etc., when they are conforming to that, the same kind of compliance should also be with respect to bigger countries or smaller countries, as the case might be. Here, the duality of attitude between what happens in China and what happens in India or what happens elsewhere, I think is there for people to see. So my take on very briefly, although we have a very detailed presentation later, is that political economy of media structures in India have shifted from a nexus between the state and the market took probably more of the state, because the awesome power of the state is visible in many sectors of the economy. Lastly, the duopoly situation in telecom structures, which two companies run the entire telecommunication in India, has a lot of implications the way we are going to consume data in the future. Voice is not a variable in India. Monetization of data is a variable. And monetization of data, when it takes place, it is going to bring back the old question of digital access and digital inequity. As now we have seen in the COVID, education is partially affected by not so much as the effort of the teacher or the institution in wanting to reach out to students. It is mainly affected by the lack of network access as an infrastructure and lack of multiple devices in a family. This might sound as a very trivial argument, but the fact remains that a key sector like education is also become a subject matter of political economy discourses in terms of both affordability and accessibility. It is not to say that the days are gloomy. We definitely have positive indications. There is regulatory pressures possible. There are moral pressures possible. There's a great amount of intellectual debate that is going on. For example, we had a lot of debate in terms of internet freedom in India. It was a larger movement than any other country in the world, and we had successful outcomes as a result of that. Lastly, the distinction between is consent manufactured of the Chomskyan perspective, or is network descent of the Castell's variety. Both seem to be existing. The farmers' movement is an example of how a large-scale descent could indeed be brought around, and after a year, the government did go down to the farmers' pressure. There are many other movements in environment which may not have had similar success, but the hope is that political economy, if it argues from the marginalized upwards in a country like India, I think we have a great future for this discipline. Thank you, Punita, for this opportunity. And
thank you, sir. Thank you. It was like again sitting in back in your classes. And now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Graham Murdoch. He's an emeritus professor of culture and economy at the Loughborough University. He's internationally known for his research in communication and culture, combining insights and methods from across the social and human sciences. He has held the Bonnier Chair at the University of Stockholm and the teaching chair at the Free University of Brussels, and I've been a visiting professor at the universities of Auckland, California, and at San Diego, Mexico City, Curtin, Western Australia, and Bergen. In recognition of his contribution to educating generations of Chinese students over 2 decades, he was recently awarded a guest professorship in the journalism department of Fudan University in Shanghai. He served for 4 years as vice president of the International Association of Media and Communication Research. His writings have been translated into 21 languages. His books include, as co-editor, Money Talks, Media, Markets, Crisis, and Carbon Capitalism and Communication, Confronting Climate Crisis. A new edition and greatly expanded edition of the influential text, Researching Communications, written jointly with colleagues, was recently published by Bloomsbury. When I did my PhD, I happened to read a lot of professors' work, and that was available, to us. And thanks to COVID and online events, I happened to attend 2 of his lectures, one from Pakistan, which was held in Pakistan, and one from India. And he never repeats the same thing twice. It's each time you hear him, it's different and it's informative and it's full of information. And I'm waiting to hear from you, Professor Graham Murdoch. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Is it possible to get the PowerPoint up on the screen?
Manushree, are you sharing the PowerPoint?
Can you share it from your end?
Sure. I'll just ask Manushree.
Yes, I'm here.
Or shall I do it? Do you have or shall I?
No, I do not have that PPT.
I sent it. Okay, okay, no problem. I'll share it. Able to see?
Yes, there it is. Yeah. Great. Okay. I'll ask you when to change the slides.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for for this invitation. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to contribute to this discussion. We're standing at I think, a crucial moment in history. No, just stay there for a moment on the first slide. I just want to say something about political economy. The first speaker made some very important points. This is a perspective that emerges in Britain and Europe at the end of the 18th century. And two things are happening simultaneously. One is that you see a massive transformation in the economic system towards what we now know as capitalism. But as the first speaker pointed out, that was from the very beginning part of a wider configuration of imperialism. So you have an economic system, but you also have a massive transformation in the political system. And if we want to nominate an origin point for political economy, it would be the year 1776. In that year, Adam Smith publishes his great work, The Wealth of Nations, that becomes the Bible of what we now think of as free market economics. He argues that the best way to guarantee a good society is to have maximum freedom for markets, and the state should have the minimum responsibility, only for a very few basic things like keeping law and order. That's been an enormously influential idea, and it's come back, as we'll see in a minute, in the last 30 years in a number of societies. But what else happens in 1776, of course, is the American Declaration of Independence, where you have the world's first republic. They divorce themselves from the monarchical rule of England and declare a republic of citizens, of individuals who have the right to determine the government under which they will be ruled. And so political economy was from the beginning an attempt to understand the difficult relationship between the economic system and the political system, particularly what were the conditions of citizenship? What kind of resources do citizens need in order to be fully active and participatory in the society? And of course, some of those resources were material, income, housing, health, and so on. But some of them were symbolic, which is why communications became a major focus of attention. Thomas Jefferson, one of the authors of the American Declaration, said very soon afterwards that if he had to choose between a government without a press and a press without a government, he would choose the second. And as you know, in the American system, there is a clause that says that the government shall make no law that abridges freedom of the press. The problem was that freedom of the press was equated with economic freedom. And that soon became a problem, as we know, because you had monopolization, you had abusive power from owners. And so you had a reaction. You had the formation of public service systems, which the first speaker outlined very well. And that's still basically where we are. We're still arguing about the balance between a market system and a public system. But there's something else about the origins of political economy. It was, unlike what happened later with economics as an academic discipline, political economy was from the very beginning very much strongly rooted in ethics, moral philosophy. Adam Smith was famous in his lifetime, not so much for The Wealth of Nations, but for his first book, which is called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which celebrates empathy and solidarity as the bedrock of a good society. And so there's a wider question. How can communications contribute to a good society? Now, what a good society is has been a huge debate and still is within philosophy. But I think one of the elements that we're now confronting is the question of sustainability. And that's what I want to excavate a little in this talk. We're now at a point in human history where we may be at a tipping point. We may be at a point of no return, where what we do in the next decade, the next 2 decades, will determine what happens to us and also what happens to the planet. Next slide, please. We're very familiar with this. We're currently living with 2 gigantic crises. The long accumulating crisis of the climate, which exploded certainly in the Northern Hemisphere this year, but around the world, in extreme weather events, huge conflagrations of fire, flood, mudslips, and all the rest. So suddenly people have begun to understand that the climate crisis is not something far away. It's not just a lonely polar bear on a piece of ice far away in the Arctic. It's actually here and now in your back garden. And there's nowhere that will be safe. But we're also living with a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm speaking to you from my house because I'm not allowed to go anywhere at the moment by government order. I want to try to excavate a way of thinking about the relationship between communication and these 2 crises. Next slide, please. They're both long accumulating crises, but if we look at these 2 very simple charts, we see that they have both accelerated in a way from about 1980 onwards. You look at the chart with the red columns, that shows you rising temperatures, and you see that they've shot up almost at 45 degrees from around 1980. The other chart shows you deforestation, and again you can see that it's gone up. Why has it happened? Well, some very obvious reasons. Corresponds with a massive increase in industrialization, particularly in China after the death of Mao. And most of that industrialization has been driven by dirty coal as the main source of energy, which of course is the major greenhouse gas. But we've also seen more people, for the first time in human history, more people living in cities than live in the countryside. And that's required an enormous increase in the intensification of agriculture. But it's also gone along with a new kind of consumer culture, part of which is an acceleration, what I call hyper-consumption. We'll come to that in a minute. And one of the best examples of that is fast food. We've seen a great explosion of fast foods over traditional foods. And we've been clearing forests every day to make space for cattle, soybeans, and palm oil. A total disaster. Next slide, please. So if you look at fossil fuel consumption, you see that far from it actually going down, it's gone up. The 3 great fossil fuels, these are compacted deposits of carbon that are buried in the earth. We excavate them and we burn them, and that creates huge amounts of energy. But it also creates a blanket over the Earth's surface that keeps the heat from escaping. And that's why we have global warming. And you have 3 great fossil fuels. You have coal, oil, and gas. And you see they've all gone up quite dramatically in recent years. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. The other thing is the massive increase in deforestation. Here's a truly terrifying statistic. This is 2019, but it's actually accelerated since then. Every 6 seconds in that year, somewhere in the world, a football-sized pitch of primary rainforest disappeared. Now, why is that a problem? It's a problem for two reasons. First of all, traditionally, forests, and particularly rainforests, are carbon sinks. They absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and reconvert it into carbon. For the first time this year, the Amazon, which is the world's greatest rainforest, is emitting more carbon dioxide than it's sequestering. So it's become a problem rather than an asset. But the other thing about deforestation is that it's a fundamental cause of pandemics. Next slide, please. Next slide. Can we change the slide? No, the one above that. Now, there's a lot of argument about COVID-19, and I've been very much involved in that. But there's no question, I think, that the balance of scientific evidence is that this is what we call a zoonotic disease. That is, it's transmitted by animals to humans. And it's almost certainly a two-stage transmission. It starts with bats. Bats are the most extensive species on the Earth's surface. There are more bats than any other animal. And bats are incredibly good at carrying disease without harming themselves. If you destroy their habitats, you force them closer to areas of high-density human habitation. And when they arrive there, of course, they're very adaptable. They're very good at finding new places to live, but they're also very good at spreading disease, either directly to humans or via other animals, wild animals, or sometimes domestic animals. And COVID-19 looks like it was spread through a wild animal that was then sold in the famous wet market in Wuhan. So the more we cut down the forests, the more we will almost certainly generate future pandemics, some of which may be even more catastrophic than the one we're currently living with. Next slide, please. So, where does communications fit into this? I want to make two arguments. First of all, to retrieve what we might think of as the fourth dimension of communication. If you look at communication studies, which I've spent my career working in, there have traditionally been three kinds of focuses. There's the idea of communications as a set of industries that employ people, have very large organizational systems, have complicated relationships to the economy through advertising and so on. So that what we now think of as political economy and economics. Then communications is the central symbolic space that we all inhabit now. It's the place where we spend most of our time to find out what is happening, listening to stories, looking at images, communicating with each other, and so on. It's a symbolic space, but it's also a social space. It's a space where we organize our relationships with each other. And communication studies has done wonderful work in all three of those areas, and all three of them, of course, absolutely pivotal. But there's a fourth dimension which is often forgotten, which is that when you look at communications, it depends upon infrastructures. It depends on physical systems of wires, satellites, aerials, and also devices, television sets, laptops, game-playing devices, smartphones. All of those infrastructures and devices require scarce resources, minerals, they use energy, and they create waste. So they actually have a fundamental, as we'll see in a minute, a fundamental relationship to the climate crisis. If we carry on with the communication systems we currently have, we're going to make the climate crisis a lot worse. The other relationship is through consumption. Almost all of the communication systems that have developed since that point of the 1980s have been commercial. They've been advertising saturated, and they've been the prime drivers of an accelerated consumer system. You see that all over the world. That's a disaster because, again, all of the production systems required to produce those Gucci handbags and trainers and fashion shoes and so on, all of that is creating a massive problem in the climate. But let's look at one particular object. Let's look at an iPhone. Next slide, please. Now, you can make some difference to the climate crisis by how you use your phone. You can, for example, switch it off. But the truth is that, and this is Apple's own estimate, 80% of the emissions from an iPhone occur before you've even bought it. So the real problem is not you and the way you use the phone, although there are problems. It's actually the whole process of manufacturing. Next slide, please. So one of the things we need to do is to reconnect the political economy of communication to the wider political economy of capitalism. And we need to look very carefully at every moment in the production chain. We need to look at the extraction of materials, for example, cobalt, lithium, the rare metals that we need for batteries that go into your cell phone. We need to look at the system of production and assembly. Who's making these objects? Under what conditions? Are the labor conditions reasonable or are they exploitative? We need to look at the way those objects come to us. We often forget this. Most of them will be traveling on container ships. Container ships have got massively bigger. You remember that one that got stuck in the Suez Canal? Container ships are an oceanic disaster. They're destroying marine life, but they're also creating huge amounts of pollution in the ocean, but also in the ports where they load and unload. And then when you actually get the machine, you're consuming massive amounts of energy. But you're also generating massive amounts of data, and that data has to be stored. And those storage facilities are themselves very emissions intensive. But because of this system of hyper-consumerism, you're encouraged to throw that machine away within 18 months. We're now at the 13th iteration of the iPhone. Where have all the others gone? Well, they've gone to huge contemporary pyramids of crap in low-income countries, far away from anywhere that you will ever see, and they're not biodegradable. And often you see children crawling on those heaps, trying to scavenge metals that can be recycled and resold. So we're producing also a massive amount of waste. We're also producing a massive amount of plastic waste. It's not just the objects, it's all the packaging. We now know that microplastic waste covers the entire Earth's surface. It's been found at the top of Everest, and it's been found at the bottom of the deepest ocean trench in the ocean. And it's been found in fetuses before they're born. So we're actually poisoning not just the planet, but we're poisoning ourselves. Next slide, please. Here's a set of startling statistics. This is 1 minute on the internet, and you can see how much data is being generated and deposited. And a lot of that data is now fact data. It's visual. It's downloading video, downloading movies, downloading games. All of these take up massive amounts of storage space, and they generate massive amounts of emissions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next one, please. Yes. Oh, okay. Let's go to this. We know what's happening with the iPhone, and there's a lot of information about the impact of that. But we're now on the edge of some very big changes. Facebook has just changed its name to Meta because the CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, wants you to enter what he calls the metaverse. This is a three-dimensional space where you will be able to do all the things you normally do, but online. We'll be able to have, this is part of the metaverse that we're in now. We're having this meeting. But Zuckerberg imagines it much more comprehensively and much more totally. In fact, you would probably never need to go out of your house at all if his vision came true. Truly terrifying. But there's a lot of work and a lot of money going in to make this a reality. Next slide, please. But it's part of a system of massive changes which are going to transform communication and indeed transform almost every aspect of our lives. The metaverse is one, artificial intelligence is another, and blockchain technologies. Let's have a look at these. Next slide, please. We can get an idea of what might happen with the metaverse if we look at a very simple statistic. This is the electricity consumption of different countries, but you'll notice that game playing in California, despite the fact that there's something of an economic depression in California, but it's still one of the world's richest places. Game players in California are generating more electricity consumption than a number of major countries. You see the ones underneath them. So this creates another issue we might want to return to, a question of global justice, that the privileges of those rich fraternity boys at Stanford and all over California are being bought at the price of the immiseration of those countries. And as we heard earlier, many countries still don't have network connections. Around half of the world's population aren't connected. But we face a paradox, what we can call the paradox of connectivity. Suppose everybody in the world was connected, and there are good social justice reasons for thinking that would be a good idea, because connectivity gives you access to increasingly resources that you cannot get in any other way. So it's a good thing in one way, but it could be a disaster environmentally if everybody was connected. But at the moment, you see that game playing is a massive consumer of electricity. Next slide, please. Or artificial intelligence is another massive consumer. Training one AI model. Artificial intelligence requires huge. Artificial intelligence is neither intelligent actually or artificial, but we'll leave that aside. What happens is that you train the system by loading as much data as you can find. And then the system learns to classify and sort the data out. It might be face recognition, for example. But you need enormous amounts of data to train even a very simple AI system. Well, doing that once is as much carbon dioxide as 57 people in an average year. So again, we see the machines are eating huge amounts of material. Yeah, next slide, please. And you see Bitcoin. Bitcoin is another, there's a huge amount of enthusiasm for Bitcoin. It's only one example of the application of a wider technology called blockchain. But you see here, if one Bitcoin transaction is the equivalent of 126, almost 127 hours of watching YouTube. That's more YouTube than you could possibly watch in a lifetime. is eaten up by one transaction of Bitcoin. So this is the world that we're moving towards, because there's a lot of very heavy money backing these technologies. Next slide, please. And here's a startling statistic. Bitcoin, there are problems with calculating this on a world basis, of course, but this estimate is that Bitcoin is using more energy than the country of Argentina. Let's have a think about that. Next slide, please. So then we come to hyperconsumption. This is all tied up with a new kind of, well, it's not new, but it's an intensified kind of consumption that is driving this system. That economic growth depends upon sustaining this consumption. So it's always there, always on, which is why the mobile phone is so good for this. But it's also based on the rapid replacement, fast food, fast fashion, fast everything. It's based on a massive extension of the credit system. So we're moving beyond credit cards to simply swiping your smartphone over the payment. The idea of that is you don't think about what you're doing. It's instantaneous. You don't have time to consider whether you really want to do this. It's so easy to do it. We're running up massive amounts of consumer debt around the world, debt that people can't possibly repay. But we're also encouraging people to think of themselves primarily, their identity, not as citizens, not as members of a social formation, which has rights, but also carries responsibilities for the vitality of the public sphere, but as consumers, where you can solve your problems by an individual purchase. You are what you buy. That what you buy is an invisible language through which you project yourself to other people. So when they see you with that jacket or that handbag, they know exactly what kind of a person you are. This is what you're being encouraged to ingest as a primary identity. It abolishes, of course, the two other great identities of modernity, not only the citizen, but also the worker. You're no longer the work you do, you're actually what you buy. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Yeah, I'm just having a problem.
Okay, you're doing a great job. I'm sorry I can't do it myself.
No.
So I've worked a lot with children, and I've been doing research on food recently. And here's a contrast. One of the reasons that the internet has become a dominant space for advertising, it's taking advertising away from broadcasting and away from the press, as we all know, is because there's virtually no regulation. And advertisers are allowed to get away with things on the internet that they can't do on television and broadcasting, particularly in relationship to advertising for children. So you have influencers, you have children who are paid to talk up products to other children. The assumption is that a child is more likely to take seriously or more likely to be attracted to something said by somebody like themselves rather than a big corporation. But it's a public health disaster, because fast food is creating an obesity crisis around the world, not only in rich countries, but increasingly in poor countries. And it's part of this chain reaction that is also manufacturing pandemics. Okay, next slide, please. So where does that leave us? Well, if you haven't seen it, I'd recommend a book by Kate Raworth. She's a radical feminist political economist. It's called Donut Economics. It's a strange title, but what she argues, and this is becoming more and more accepted, the livable space for us in the future and now is that pale green circle. And there are two rims. One is its social foundations. These are all the social policy issues that we've confronted all from day one. Issues of health, issues of education, issues of housing, issues of employment conditions, and so on. These are necessary components of what we might call the good life. And we've struggled for equality, we struggle for justice, we struggled for mutuality. But as she points out, there's an outer circle, there's a series of environmental ceilings. If we break through them, then we destroy any chance of building a good society. So our challenge is to stay within that pale green circle, to continue to struggle for the social justice that we've always been advocating, but to now pay acute attention to the consequences of everything we do for those ecological ceilings. Next slide, please. But just to give you some hope, there are people grappling with this. If you haven't come across this, I recommend it. There's a system. It began with the British Film Institute, but it's now become a global system. It's called Albert. You can easily find it on any search engine. And what Albert does, what they've tried to do is to construct a way for production teams in film and television to calculate their carbon footprint. That's all the carbon emissions that they are involved in at every aspect of their production. And it's a really interesting and important intervention. And you'll see that it doesn't only mean looking at what goes on in the production itself, it's the travel, it's the food, it's everything that goes into the production. So the first thing we need to do as communication scholars and practitioners is to green our production chains. We need to think very carefully about the ecological impact of everything we do when we produce a piece of symbolic work. That's not going to be easy, but I think it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, we're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And you can come to the paradoxical situation where you might work, for example, for a newspaper that has a very strong policy on climate change in terms of its coverage, but in terms of its material basis is actually making things worse. We need to close that gap. Second, last slide, please. But to return to a really important point that was made by the first speaker, we need to reimagine public provision. We now can see how deleterious rampant market forces can be. They are a force of destruction. There's no question about it. So we need to go back to thinking of not just to have regulation, we need to have regulation, but we also need to have a strong counter system, a system of public provision that speaks to people not in their role of consumers, but in their identity as citizens, to get people to understand that their own quality of life depends upon the vitality of the public sphere. There's no point in being able to buy a luxurious car if your children can't play outside because the city's so polluted that it's going to choke them. We have to take responsibility for each other. And I think one of the most exciting things that's going on now is a reimagining of what that public space might be. I've been involved in this public service manifesto, and again, you can find it on the web. It's been signed by a very large number of people, I'm delighted to say, including Noam Chomsky and Jürgen Habermas, not inconsiderable figures. It's an experiment. It's a first shot across the bows. It's a thought experiment in what would public service look like in today's world. We can't go back to something we invented 50 years ago. We have to have something that's contemporary. And a lot of my work recently has been around something I call the digital commons. That if what we're seeing now is commercial enclosure, the commercial theft of our symbolic world. We need to go back to the commons, which was the historic opposition where resources were held in common and regulated in common and available to everybody with no payment. We see two things, just in conclusion, which are hopeful. One, we see a lot of public institutions, universities, museums, galleries, libraries, digitalizing their collections and making their expertise more widely available. There's an enormous repository of material now available on a global basis. But we also see the resurgence, the vitality of grassroots activity of all kinds, people making things together to share together. So what we need to do is to bend our minds to how we can combine the best of those two things. In economic terms, it would be the political economy of public goods, but also the political economy of gift economies, where people collaborate to make something and don't ask for payment. Both of those things are very lively at the moment, and together they produce, I think, a viable alternative to the commercial destruction of collective culture. And that, I think, will be necessary if we're to avoid both a climate catastrophe, but also another huge pandemic. If we continue with this intensified, commercialized system, we have no chance whatsoever of saving the planet. And we will be held responsible for that by our children and by our grandchildren. That's a huge responsibility, but it's a huge challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity, because as scholars of communication, we're in the eye of the storm. We really are at the center of things, because digital media are ubiquitous and they're involved in everything that's done. So it's our responsibility as scholars and practitioners to make a strong intervention, and we must do it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Now, the moment we've been waiting for, I call upon Dr. Umashankar Pandey to honor Dr. Josephine Joseph with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Dr. Yusuf.
Can you play the video, please? Can we play the video first? Manushree, Kunal? So the GMEC is honored to recognize Dr. Josephine Joseph for her lifetime contribution to media and communication education in India. The certificate reads, GMEC is honored to recognize your stellar contribution to the field of media and communication education as India celebrates its 75th year of independence, December 10th, 2021, signed by the Honorable President GMEC, Professor K.G. Suresh, and the Secretary GMEC, Professor Ujjwal K. Chaudhary. Just to emphasize, it's not just a virtual honor. We'll be sending a real certificate to your address and a memento from GMEC, and we are indeed honored, ma'am, to be able to confer this award on you. I will request our guru, Professor Dr. B.P. Sanjay, to introduce you and take it forward from there. So thank you everyone on behalf of GMEC.
Thank you. Congratulations, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, Thank you, Professor Graham Murdoch, for contextualizing the field and its new approach. We are indeed, honored to get a new perspective. It's now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, a longtime friend, and a well-wisher, Dr. Josephine Joseph. Um, Our journey at the University of Madras began around the same time, and although I left the university a few years later, coming in and going out, it is to the credit of Dr. Josephine, who held the reins of the University of Madras for such a long time. What is important attribute of Dr. Josephine Joseph is the humility and the perspective she brought to hundreds of students at the University of Madras and a host of other institutions in India and probably elsewhere too. She started and energized the PhD program at the University of Madras. Now PhD programs are available at the beck and call of the scholars, but those were the days when PhD programs were very scarce, and she kind of, handled many scholars. And of course, today's host, Dr. Punita, is one of them. Josephine's main area of interest has been in film studies. She's also brought women's perspective to the study of films. I would not kind of, go to the extent of talking about feminism as such, but looking at cinema from women's perspective has been one of her scholastic achievements. Josephine also has, contributed a lot in organizing seminars in the late 70s and early 1980s, where we had to struggle for resources in India to host seminars. And she was instrumental in leading major seminars on communication and development, communication and women's studies, communication and civil society movement. I can go on and on with regard to her achievements as far as the institutionalization of the discipline in India is concerned. Apart from that, Dr. Josephine has been the president of the Indian Council for Communication Training and Research, ICTTR. She has helped in the continuation of the activities of the ICTTR. Now, of course, defunct. But when it had to its credit publication of journals, a peer-reviewed journal, etc., etc. And Josephine handheld us in all those activities. Now, University of Madras is a small institution in terms of the scale and intensity of its infrastructure and resources. When you have infrastructure and resources, running a program becomes that much easier. But contending with the lack of resources and still nurturing the intellectual climate, networking with a host of media institutions, providing for internships to the students, and making them what they are today, I think is indeed a stellar contribution of Dr. Josephine. And indeed, I've been very happy to work with her as a colleague and also learn many things in my life. She has been personally a well-wisher of our family and friend, and what else can I say? I mean, it's a kind of a personal reminiscence of a great person, and I'm indeed honored that GMC today has decided to confer the Lifetime Achievement Award on Josephine, a truly deserving award, and it's also a recognition of the stellar minds that you have guided throughout your life. Your CV is long enough, Punita did provide, but I thought that a personal touch of my introduction is far better than the long CV that you had. And indeed, it's my proud privilege as a colleague to be part of this introduction. And may God bless you, Josephine, with a long life and many more years of intellectual contribution to the field and guiding many more younger minds. Josephine Joseph, you deserve the Lifetime Achievement Honor. Congratulations and best wishes from each one of us.
Thank you, Sanjay. I'm really honored and humbled to receive this award from GCEC. I never expected, and leading a retired life in one corner of Mysore. And suddenly one fine day, Punita calls me and tells me that I'm going to be honored as a teacher and for my lifetime achievements. Thank you. I thank GCEC for this honor. And as Sanjay said, we have come a long way, from when I started my career as a teacher, when I saw so many young faces, so many young people as part of this conclave and this organization. It gives me a very, very positive thoughts, and I'm very happy that journalism communication education is going to have a very bright future. It has a very bright future in India from what I saw today and what I experienced today. And I must also thank Professor Graham for the wonderful lecture that he gave. His lecture is an eye-opener, and it makes us think that everything that we do, every act of ours, which we do so blindly, and without a second thought, it contributes to the environmental degradation. It's really a very educative process lecture for me. Thank you, Professor Graham. And I wish to make a few observations on journalism communication education in India. As I see it today, I feel happy because this is the year which can be considered as the centenary year of journalism education in India. Journalism education was first started in India by Dr. Annie Besant in 1920 at the Theosophical Society, Adyar. And I even had the honor of meeting one of the editors of a Kannada evening here in Mysore, who had a diploma from the institute that was run by Dr. Annie Besant. And this is also what can be called as a 75 years of journalism education that was introduced in Mysore University, that as a BA degree course, where journalism was one of the major subjects of a liberal arts course at the Maharajas College, University of Madras. And this year it also marks 50 years of journalism, a master's in journalism in Mysore University. And I'm one of those first batch students of the master's program in Mysore University. And this year also marks the centenary year of my professor, Dr. Nadi Krishnamurthy, who was a pioneer in journalism education, not only in Mysore University, but also his contribution is there for the whole of India, in the initial years, and also to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and such other neighboring countries. So I'm really honored and I'm really happy, and I thank you once more. My observations on journalism communication education is that, as I said, it has grown quantitatively, over the years. Colleges all over the country, universities, and private institutions are offering courses in journalism and communication. So in terms of quantity, there's no dearth at all. But I think one has to think in terms of the quality of the type of journalism communication education that is being offered in India. My concern is that, particularly in terms of the self-financed private colleges, they come up with, every college wants to have a course in journalism or in communication. And the problem is the resources that they have to manage and conduct the courses and really train the students. My personal observation is that maybe they have, with compulsions for recognition, they get some equipments and they appoint a couple of teachers and they just manage to, manage these courses or run these courses. But what is lacking there is the real input that the students get, or the real kind of training that the students get in these courses. The importance, of course, is given to the technological aspect. They get cameras and television sets and television cameras and things like that. But the library is infrastructure in terms of physical library, in terms of books, journals, magazines, even in terms of newspapers, is still lacking very, very much. So I don't know, the teachers, especially the ones who go for inspection and give affiliation to these courses, have to be very, very strict. I appeal to them, to see that, the necessary infrastructure is made compulsory and it is made available so that the courses are really strengthened, and the students who pay through their nose, for the courses that the degrees that they join and the degrees that they get are properly trained and really trained in these courses. And one other observation that I make is, there is a lot of emphasis on practical skills and practical training. And both on the part of the faculty and particularly from the students, there is a resistance for theoretical learning, which is the foundation. Without the theory, the practice or the practicals don't really make much of a meaning, So there has to be an equal importance given to both, to the theoretical input as well as the practical aspect of the course, which is very, very important. And particularly from the perspective of the present media scenario in India, I feel that there has to be a very particular emphasis given to the students' understanding of the Constitution of India, which is very important, because the entire our whole life, the entire life of the country, the entire system in the country is based on the Constitution. So the students who become communicators, who become journalists, have to have a proper understanding and proper knowledge of the Constitution. And emphasis has to be given to ethics and media laws in the country. There is, I feel that there is not much of importance given to ethics and the media laws, because over the years, the Parliament of India has passed something like 75 acts, which are directly or indirectly connected to the media, which control or which regulate the media. So an understanding of this is very, very important for students of journalism and communication to have to, in terms of whatever field that they want to enter to, whether it is teaching or get into the media or have their own enterprises and things like that, a proper understanding of media laws and media and have a firm rooting in the ethics is very, very important. Personal ethics has to be given a lot of importance, and of course it is important to see that human values are recognized, human values are respected. A journalist has the social responsibility. So this social responsibility has to be, has to be followed by every communicator, every journalist, which is very, very important. I say this because of late we have problems facing the media in India. At least a few problems which I need to highlight. One is the problem of paid news. So there is hardly any distinction between, distinction made between regular news and factual news and the paid news. The paid news is passed on, to the audience as the regular news or the factual news. And it is not ethical at all. It is not right. You cannot dupe the readers or the audience like that. And there is also what can be called as the opaque private treaties. There are the treaties, between media organizations and corporates in India, which is the peril of the society and the people of India. And so the journalist or the communicator is there to serve, the masses, the oppressed classes of society, the people who really need to be helped, the people who need really to be taken care of, and not the corporates and industrial establishments in India. There is also what can be called as a blatant blackmailing, and it happened, it's there from the 90s onwards. There is the journalists or the have given up their ethical values and been what can be called as serving the corporates or the organizations for a payment, which is not right, which is unethical on the part of the otherwise, it's also the blackmail. Persons, individuals, organizations, and demand, in term money to give exposure to them, which even if they deserve, it is not done by the journalists or the communicators. There is also what can be called as a flawed measurement of the audience research in India, and also the readership, which has to be taken care of. There are publications in India. We have thousands and thousands of print media publications, but when we really look into the existence of these publications, many of them are not there only on paper. They produce or they print only voucher copies to be given to the registrar of newspapers, and they are not the publications which are really in circulation in the society. So this is an unethical practice which has been going on, and we have had this what we call as the audience research, being flawed or being manipulated, or fakeness in that, the audience research results. In the case of in the past few months, maybe 2-3 months back, it was an exposure, and how there is an understanding between the communicator or the journalist and the rating organization, which is again an unethical practice, which is not right. And I think our students need to be trained to be really ethical and to be aware of these malpractices which are going on in the media. The trial by media is yet another practice that is there. We have experienced it in the case of 2 persons. One is the Jessica Lal murder case, the trial by media, and also Sushant Singh Rajput, and it's really unfortunate. The media become the judge, and even when the case is pending in a court of law, the media have taken up and almost passed the judgment, in these 2 cases, which is very, very unfortunate, and which is not really ethical. Also the making unfair and unwanted comments in the media, and the people maybe they are not aware, the kind of damage that they are doing to the field of journalism and communication in India by such unethical practices. What is unfortunate is also that the media is owned by a handful of people. We may, as I said, in terms of quantity, the number is big. We have any number of newspapers, any number of magazines, any number of television channels. The social media is very, very flourishing in India. But what is unfortunate is the control is in the hands of a very few people, in India. And as a result of which what we see is there is where we don't even have much of variety in terms of the content of the media. The same things being repeated, in the news bulletins, in the newspaper columns, and such other things. What is unfortunate, the unfortunate situation that is very alarming in India is the threats to journalists and attacks on journalists. Of late, it's very, very common. Journalists are threatened by people, by political people who have contacts or connections. Journalists are not able to, or communicators are not able to raise their voice or say anything or be critical, of the policies or the goings on in the society or in the government, and there are any number of lawsuits, which are slammed against journalists and communicators, and they're also being threatened. Their life is at threat, So these are some of the observations that I make on the part of the media scenario in this country. And as journalism educators or communication educators, it is our responsibility to see that we prepare our students, we strengthen our courses to produce journalists and communicators who are really able to stand up to the challenges, that are posed to them when they enter the media field. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure always to listen to you. Now, quickly, can we move on to the next speaker, Sabita Nadraj? Just a minute. Sabita is, again, a senior from Madras University. She has been associated with the department personally also as an external examiner when we held PR campaigns. So she has, right now, she's the general manager of Indian Oil Corporation, Tamil Nadu State Office. And she has a rich experience of 2.5 decades in the oil and gas industry. She's been the head of Western and Southern Region Media and Communication, and is currently heading the Planning and Coordination Department at Indian Oil, Tamil Nadu State Office. And Savita has, received so many awards, to just mention a few: Women Executive of the Year Award in 2017, and Women Executive of the Decade Award in 2018. And I mean, she's held a lot of industry positions. We will put our detailed bio in the chat box. Right now, over to you, Savita.
Thank you so much, Punita, respected Dr. Sanjay, Dr. Graham Murdoch, and the Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Dr. Josephine. While Punita had a fan moment, when she was introducing others, I could actually catch a glimpse of smile in Dr. Sanjay when she was introducing me. To all the ladies and gentlemen who are present here, it is indeed an extremely, honored and privileged position for me to be sitting here and presenting my thoughts. I wouldn't say it's an address at all, in the presence of Dr. Sanjay and Dr. Josephine, under whose guidance I have shaped my thoughts. I am looking at it as an opportunity to submit before you all certain points for you all to consider. And I also think I have been brought in to give a perspective of the corporate, highlight for the kind of points raised by Dr. Sanjay and Dr. Graham, and I am thankful for that. The main point that I could actually sense from all the three speakers who spoke before me is that growth is something that is inevitable and is something that is always sought after. Growth and development is what drives every organism and human beings and any ecosystem or the country at large. That being the case, I could sense the pain that Dr. Josephine was highlighting in terms of better infrastructure and a better environment for the media industry to thrive. And when Dr. Sanjay was saying, there is the state and market nexus, how it has changed and how it is going forward. Dr. Sanjay, I would like to highlight to you that state and market nexus, I wouldn't call it a nexus. It is a partnership and a coordination that exists for public sector enterprises or oil and gas industry majors that are operating in the country. So to that extent, any kind of a new development that we are finding in the country is because of close hand-holding between the objectives of what the state says and what needs to be carried on by the responsible corporate citizens. That is how I would name it. And you also highlighted about how the market ownership, the corporatization of market ownership in terms of media world has changed. I would also like to present to you that the corporatization of energy distribution is also undergoing a huge change. Going forward, many of you would find that the owners of new energy entities would not be oil and gas majors, but there would be, even to the extent of financial institutions or data-driven systems, that you would be owning it, because that is where I found a very relevant point when you made voice is not a variable now at all. It is more of data that is going to consume a large space, and data-driven decisions are definitely finding center stage in every activity of the energy and gas sector. And to that extent, what Graham Murdoch highlighted in terms of the energy that is being produced by every activity and the donut economics that he highlighted, Mr. Murdoch, I would like to present to you and submit to you. We are in the, especially oil and gas industry majors, Indian Oil, is in the aspect of regenerative and distributive economy that you're looking at. While we are definitely fueling the growth aspects of the ecosystems where the entire industry works on, we are also working suitably on the regenerative and distributive economy. Let me table to you, when our Prime Minister highlights that India needs to be a 5 trillion economy by 2030, or even our Chief Minister here, I'm speaking from Tamil Nadu, I'm connected from Chennai. He has said that Tamil Nadu needs to reach a 1 trillion economy by 2030, $1 trillion. And if we are going to actually hope for greater development for the country, I am placing before you the developmental aspirations of a growing economy like India. There are developed economies across the world which has got different energy aspirations. Every activity of ours definitely produces energy, but what we need to concentrate on is whether that energy is being produced and it's being taken forward with responsibly. And the highlight here is, if we have to reach the aspirations and aspirational level of the governments or its people, there would be certain kind of changes that would have to happen, and each of these changes is definitely going to give a carbon footprint or energy footprint that we need to be seized of. For the information of everybody present here, India is, while it is being highlighted as 1/3 energy consumer of the world, the per capita energy consumption that we have is very low when compared to the rest of the emerging countries. So even in the recent COP26 conclave that was held at Glasgow, as an emerging economy, it has been highlighted that the developed nations would have to partake in the energy ambitions of the growing economies, and especially of India, which has a large population, and it still has to move forward in several fronts. in terms of its developmental goals. To that extent, the pioneering or the leaders, we are a large commercial organization and we are the leading energy major in the country. We are actually pioneering several fronts in terms of new fuels and alternate energy options. And while doing that, it is also a highlight that while several investments are being made for green energy, and the energy footprints that you're talking of would definitely will have to go forward with a responsible emission platform also. The BS6 fuels that we are using is very clean fuel with very low sulfur content. And for a dieselized economy like us, diesel being used now is a green fuel. The reason I'm highlighting to you all is media has a large role to play while highlighting the efforts of a corporate or a government in taking forward the aspirational, reasons or the kind of ambitions that we have for better growth and greater development. We are actually converting, plastics also to responsible fuels. So with that as a background, the topic that has been highlighted today is in terms of the COVID efforts that a corporate has taken. And unless and until I table it in full steam to you all, the kind of an appreciation that a corporate would have in hand-holding the growth of the economy would not be there. And I fully enjoyed the way Graham Murdoch highlighted the carbon emissions that come out of every effort. So just to present to you all, I would definitely look forward to a greater time limit from GMEC and GCEC to highlight the kind of efforts that a corporate makes. But in terms of the COVID efforts, and this is something that is reflective of the entire oil industry that has taken forward, while I am going to be mentioning few of the points that Indian Oil took forward with, it is a reflection of the oil and gas industry or the energy industry that has taken these efforts. You can put it into three broad, pillars. One is in terms of efforts.
Sorry to, we are already exceeding time. Just wind up.
Nita, you will have to give me this time because it is not my fault that I am at this, because Murdoch has highlighted certain points which will have to be countered from a corporate perspective. So I am not going to be letting go on this, because as media people, I
give you another platform another time.
No. I'm sorry. I will take the time from Mr. Murdoch, Dr. Sanjay, and Dr. Josephine to table my points for 5 minutes here, and you will all have to listen to me. And that's a request from me to all of you. So in terms of internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, or in terms of our own vendors, the kind of efforts that have been taken forward, whether it is importing liquid medical oxygen, which was necessary, and reaching it to several hospitals, we were given the responsibility to source liquid medical oxygen from Middle East by the government of India. We actually had a dedicated control room across the country. We are a vast organization, right from north to south, east to west. All our offices were actually put into this, and we imported liquid medical oxygens, and the way we had to transport it was a huge challenge, because any kind of a commercial organization like us will have to be hand in hand to take forward the governmental pressures to tackle epidemics like COVID. And we actually had to import this in 14 LNG tankers converted to, almost like 8 cryogenic road tankers were put into play. 19 ISO containers had to, transport this, and many other vehicles were we had to, the logistics of, transporting liquid medical oxygen is a nightmare. But all of us had to work 24/7 and take this forward. Otherwise, hand-holding governmental aspirations to counter an epidemic is not going to be possible. And hand-holding any kind of an energy aspiration of a country, of a people, is not going to be possible. So whether it was actually giving a medical insurance for our the face of the fuel retailing to our pump attendants, fuel customer attendants, and providing financial assistance almost like 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs in terms of any kind of an untoward incident, because all of us saw the the result of this pandemic. And even during this troubled times, essential products like petrol, diesel, LPG, or ATF is the aviation fuel. If the leaders had to go around the country to make aerial surveys or even visit rest of the other places, aviation fuel was something that had to be reached to them. People were staying at home, and we actually saw a 40% spike in our LPG supplies. Mr. Murdoch, India is a country that still, cooks its, daily food with liquefied petroleum gas, which is a packed product that is delivered to the doorsteps of every household. And we actually beat Amazon or Flipkart in terms of door delivery of a packed product. And this was something that happened round the clock and without any, we did not stop at all. We had to take permission for our delivery boys to go and deliver it at households which was COVID stricken, and all kind of preparations were taken, precautions were taken. So the kind of work that has gone into reaching this product has been phenomenal. And we are during COVID time, when rest of the products saw a downward trend, we saw an upward trend in LPG, and our fuel supplies stopped only because of transport. Otherwise, we were selling petrol, diesel. The point here is essential commodities and essential products are something that are being retailed even during a pandemic, natural disasters, or during calamities. And to that extent, energy is something that is part and parcel of our life. And as a company and as a big corporate, all of us play a role in the development aspects of anything. Even the webinar today consumes energy, but we will have to use it responsibly and offset it in a very responsible way. So, and there were several efforts that were taken, and considerable investments have been made. And whether it was the internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, or to the vendors, or to the governmental aspects, leading oil and gas organizations have played their part. And that is why this pandemic could be tided over in a way that all of us are able to sit back, relax, and actually look forward to the Omicron challenge in a more considered and in a more judicious fashion. Otherwise, it is not going to be possible. So my submission to the entire fraternity here is, it has been an extremely interesting highlight of what Graham Murdoch has highlighted, and a very, very interesting highlight by Dr. Sanjay. It is always a pleasure to listen to him. But from a corporate entity, I would definitely like to submit that media fraternity have a big responsibility on them to look at it judiciously and go forward with more of considered interactions and exchanges with people, because what you say definitely has a big role in terms of regulatory authorities. So not just an advocacy role, but I would submit that you all need to play a judicious, considered role, because we are here to be taking forward the aspirations of the people and the country. So you all need to aid us, and I would definitely look forward for better timeline to make a presentation to all of you all.
Definitely.
Look at it from both sides of the coin. Yeah, thank you.
We'll have a webinar with you. See, and that's how a super senior, submits a junior. Thank you, Savita. It's a pleasure to have you here. Now it's quick. I think I'm going to have to wind up with the 2 private presentations back to back. And please keep your presentation ready. And that's the last of the session. And just your time limit is 4 minutes. Just please stick to 4 minutes. Are you ready? Ballama? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, please go ahead. Just keep the presentation within 4 minutes. We're already much, behind the schedule. 9:25. We were supposed to wind up by 9.
Punita, it's okay. You need to give them their time. They're prepared for it, I guess. I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn, but I guess we need to give the students their time, and we are okay with it.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, you can switch on your video also. Her paper presentation will be on. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Bolama PK, Research Scholar, Department of Electronic Media from Bangalore University.
We can't see you. Can you switch on your video? We can't see you.
Switched on, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
My co-author is Dr. T. Shripati, Department of Electronic Media from Bangalore University. My topic is online news media consumption of Kodava festivals by Kodava community who are away from the region. Introduction part is Kodavas are among the Kodavas are the native inhabitants of Kodagu district, western Ghats of Karnataka. They are the land-owning agriculturists, hunters and warriors. Their history is not clearly known. Many consume news through social media than traditional media. Due to advancement in technology, many have changed their news consuming method from traditional to the modern method. So I'll be concentrating mainly on the 3 festivals of Kodavas like Kailpod, Kaveri Sankramana and Puttari. Kailpod is a festival celebrated during the transplantation of paddy crops. Individuals safeguard their crops and celebrate this festival. Kaveri Sankramana, it is the festival to celebrate the birth of river Kaveri. In the form of bubbles, river Kaveri comes in front of the in front of the individuals to bless them. Puttari is the harvest festival in Kurk where new crops are being harvested and they celebrate this festival. My objective of the study is broad focus is to find the pattern of online news consumption where the video content is available in the online platform. The parameter studies are studied or the size of the video, title given, and the tone of the presentation of the anchor or the presenter. Then second objective is to know the usability of festival news content among Kodavas, as only during the time of festival they upload video related to the cultural practices. To know how the festival coverage news impact on individual as they feel proud and gather only during the time of festivals. The methodology is the researcher used both qualitative and quantitative method. Quantitative method is used to fill the questionnaire and as well as the interview method. Then qualitative research method is adopted to clearly state the objectives and to analyze the parameters used for the research. Like content analysis is mainly focused and triangulation method is followed where to fulfill overall objective of the research. Main findings: online news channels, websites and newspapers have covered news on Kailpod, Kaveri Sankramana and Puttari. TV9, BTV, Public TV, News 1 and other channels have covered the news. Various websites like Kurg.com, One India, Kurg Tourism, newspapers like Deccan Herald, Bangalore Mirror, Vijay Karnataka and Asianet have covered the overall news of festivals. Many online video contents on Kailpod, Kaveri Sankramana and Puttari are available through online portals. Even along with the media professional, Kodavas themselves get involved in posting the videos by highlighting their tradition and remembering their culture to the younger generation who are away from the region. Many get migrated to earn their livelihood. They even gather in the samajas when they are far from the community, when they are far from their family, when they get migrated to earn their livelihood. The video content highlights the cultural heritage of Kodavas by highlighting their attire, food culture, and festival celebration only during the festivals. Overall analysis of the studies, majority of the respondents says that words used and time given to convey the message, and the tone and time used was crisp and informative. Only during the time of festival, media highlights the culture of Kodavas. Majority states that community is losing its importance even in media as many get migrated. Only during festival they get time to gather their family and celebrate festivals in samajas. The research has found that various websites, channels, and concluding part, the research has found that various websites, channels, and newspaper have covered the coverage of festivals of Kodavas. Only during the festivals, media portray their culture. The individual one who fails to join their family in the native, they visit Kodava Samaja to celebrate the festival. Many get migrated to earn their livelihood and get settled in their place itself, rather coming back and joining with their family. The consumption pattern among the individual who are away from the region differ compared to other days, as they eagerly wait to see how the celebration have done in their hometown by joining their family members. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bolama. Now I just call upon Kumarjit to, are you ready? Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
please go.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Am I audible? Ma'am, can I share my slide?
Yeah, I think Bolama has to stop stop sharing. Bolama, please stop sharing. Then, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Kumarjit, you can go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, is it visible?
Yeah, your audio. Yeah, we can see your video. Yeah.
Ma'am, you can see my video, but can you see the slides?
I can't see. Can anybody see? I can't.
No.
Not able to see.
We can't
No.
see.
Unmute yourself. Kumarjit, unmute yourself.
Just a second, ma'am. I'm trying to share my slide.
Okay. That's a little senior junior moment with Samita here. Okay.
Hey, that's
Kumar,
okay.
maybe you can present. You can start talking, Kumar.
Sorry, is
Kumarjit,
it
are you
visible
ready?
now?
You can start presenting now.
Sorry, ma'am. Is my slide visible?
Are you?
Ma'am, can I say my presentation? Actually, I'm not able to.
It's okay. You can talk. It's without presentation. Go ahead. No problem.
Okay,
You can see,
ma'am.
right?
Ma'am, thank you so much for this opportunity. Yes, ma'am, I can see my presentation. Can I say it?
No.
We can't see, but you can go ahead. If you can view, then you can go ahead.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Ma'am, title of my research study is Hello in Jammu, an exploratory study on consumption of Korean media content in suburbs. And I have delimited my research study for Jammu region. My name is Kumarji Chasgotra, and for the introductory part, I have mentioned that how Korean media in entertainment world has increased many folds. area with sizable viewership of 1.5 billion population, and now urbanization, internet
Kumarjit, are you logged in two systems? There's an echo. There's an echo. There's an echo, Kumarjit. We can't. I think you've logged in from two systems. Is that so?
Not really, ma'am.
Yeah, now it's okay. Now it's okay. No, there is a problem. There is a problem. There is a problem. We will just come back to you now. Kumarjit, can you log out and then come back in? Can you log out and come back in? Okay, I'm sorry. I think she's facing some technical issues. Now I call upon Dr. Sanjay. Kumarjit, please unmute.
Can you unmute your mobile and you need to mute your mobile.
Can we wind? I now invite Professor Sanjay to give the closing remarks.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult to give a closing remarks after such a distinguished panel who have outlined many of the issues. Particularly, it was a pleasure listening to Graham Murdoch, whose papers from 1974, many of the papers we have followed as students of political economy. Thank you, Graham Murdoch, for the new perspective that you have shared. Thanks, Josephine, and thanks and congratulations for winning the award, and also sharing your perception on the changing nature of media education, particularly the issues that young media educators should keep in mind. And Sabita, as usual, was very vivacious and did present the corporate perspective quite well. And also the fact that they braved many odds in trying to address some of the concerns. And also, you know, the sensitivity that she displayed to the observations of Graham Murdoch in trying to see what kind of effort they are making, and also the kind of debate that is taking place between the developed countries and developing countries as to you know, the problems that we have and how best we can address it. Anama, your presentation on you know, the Kodwa community and the content analysis that you adopted was very interesting, particularly the point that you made as to how the Kodwas living outside really look forward to some of these events in terms of remembering the culture. That is something that was very interesting from your paper. Kunwajit, we were not able to listen to your paper, but I think it has a very important strategic perspective coming as you have, you are from Jammu, and definitely at a later time, maybe the organizers will make available your paper and presentation on their website so that many of us can learn. Punita, Pandey, and the GMC team, thank you very much. And as always, it is useful in participating. Don't worry, Punita, we are now in the COVID time used to 3 hours, 4 hours long sessions, and we can sit through.
I'm getting repeated reminders from my, you know, team saying that it's time to wind up. You're already.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and wish you all the best. And you know, we look forward to a better and a shining and a better world.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So finally, since it's already been a long day, I'm going to keep my vote of thanks very short. First, thanks to Professor Graham Murdoch for accepting the invitation and then delivering a fabulous lecture. I think we couldn't have had anyone better on this topic. And then my own dear teacher, my supervisor, and someone I look up to, Dr. Josephine Joseph. Ma'am, you truly deserve this award. I would say some people, awards, some people, awards itself really, doesn't get really better with, but then you deserve much more than this. But still, from our end, I'm very happy that you received it. And Dr. Sanjay, I think anytime I call him, he always, especially during COVID, I think we've been having too many sessions with Sir. Sir has always been, kind to accept my invitation, and then, as usual, he just rocked the show. And finally, from Savita Raj, absolutely fabulous. And then, she responded, sat throughout the session, and then she responded fabulously. And I'd like to thank JMEC's secretary, Professor Ujjwal Kavri, for all the support, and the chairperson, KG Suresh, and our friendly colleague, Dr. Umashankar Pandey, for all the guidance, sharing numbers, for everything. I thank him really. And I thank all the technical team, especially Manusri, for all the supports. And I thank my own colleagues and my students for all part of the session now. And also they were a lot of help. They helped a lot. So thank you all. Good night. Let's meet in another platform later. Thank you.
Namaskar.
Good night.
Namaskar.
Thank you.
Namaskar.
Namaskaram.
Vanakkam, nandri. தமிழ்நாடுலேருந்து நன்றி.
மிக நன்றி கிரஹாம் முடாக் அவர்களே.
மிக்க நன்றி தமிழ்நாட்டிலிருந்து.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Good night.
Good night.
Right.